So we're going to start today. This Zoom series was inspired by the Superdiversity Institute's partnership with Frank and the Knowledge Hunters. And if you don't know much about them, you should get to know them, because actually the core of Frank and the Knowledge Hunters is quite similar to the core of the Superdiversity Institute. We are interested in finding out and using research as our base. We are evidence-based organisations, and as a company that is very successful in executive search, they've also done some research as they push out in the direct-to-search market. And not surprisingly, overwhelmingly, the key message when they do the research with board chairs is that there is a need for diversity. While that's balanced with other key deliverables, diversity is the hot topic. And so I'll be calling on Jeff McDowell and Howard Ross to close for us today. But what I want to do is I want to say to you that we've got 90 people who are coming online today. Some of them are still coming online at the moment, but we've got a lot to get through. Can I welcome, there are so many 2021 diverse board director members who have made the list. So this is a continuation really of the Ministry of Ethnic Communities partnership that the Superdiversity Institute has been involved in. There are also 2021 emerging directors who are online. There are also some very well-established chairs and directors who are here today, and there are so many of you. It's lovely to see you all, but can I just call out two in particular who've been very supportive and good colleagues and friends of mine, Doug Mackay, who's the chair of everything, and Vanessa Stoddart, who's also the chair of many things and director of many things. So this is the way it works. We've got a lot to get through. I am the muse, so I am going to give 3 thoughts and throw them out to the panel today. And then I just want the panel to respond. So they will just speak one after the other. There'll be chat function stuff coming through. We'll be putting questions to them. They'll be interfacing with each other. If you want to say something, put your hand up. We're just going to try and cram as much as we can into the next 50 minutes before we close. So here are the 3 thoughts, and then I'm just going to open it up to Karen Runge, Chair of the Arts Council of New Zealand, and also on the Radio New Zealand, and to Papa Boards, Rob Campbell, Chair of Health New Zealand, Sky City Rural Land Co, and Chancellor of AUT, Lynn Lim, Director of Restaurant Brands and General Capital NZX Companies, Chair-elect of Middlemore Foundation, Kenny Tsui, CEO of the New Zealand Geothermal Association and on the Board of Engineering New Zealand, and David Turner, Executive Director of Sequel Limited. So please just roll one after the other. Right, 3 key thoughts, here they come. 1, why is it harder for diverse directors? Firstly, is it because they come from a different cultural and linguistic background? That means that they have just a very different life experience, including how people react to them, because they're not part of the majority culture. They have become attuned, but they're attuned to the beat of a different culture and language. They attuned themselves to a culture that's not this culture. So especially in terms of soft skills, they need to be retuned. And does that mean they need more mentoring than other people, than other directors? Secondly, is it harder for diverse directors, and therefore harder to get the alpha from diverse directors because they may not connect with people from a different background? They may not connect as easily with people from the majority background in a boardroom, which may be very Anglo-Saxon and very much from an English language tradition. Does that result in more miscommunication? Does that result in greater misunderstanding? Does that result in a different appreciation of the value of what they are thinking and what they are saying? 3, is it harder for diverse directors because of a concept which is now well recorded by psychologists called stereotype threat. This is a phenomenon which happens when you see someone that looks very different from you, but there is a stereotype of what a person that looks like that should be. Now, I look like an Asian woman, and I'm told that the stereotype for someone who looks like me is that I am demure, I am self-effacing, I'm not leadership material, and I really just want to serve and support others. And so when you act inconsistently with your stereotype, it threatens those who are not used to you being out of stereotype. And this threat can cause negativity and it can cause aggression. And so the way that people deal with stereotype threat, diverse directors deal with stereotype threat, is that they are trying to adjust to it. They're trying to make sure that they don't get hurt by it. And what the psychologists tell us is that the impact on their brain function and their physiological reaction is tantamount to multitasking and being at severe risk. In other words, 50% of their energy is taken up with dealing with stereotype threat. And the result of that is that they're not able to give 100% to what they're supposed to be focusing on in the boardroom. So that's the first thought. The second thought is that all of the above may affect their confidence to speak out. Now, I interviewed Rob Campbell. One of the things that he said is that he'd noticed that diverse directors try really hard to be way too accommodating and not to be themselves, and that they should be confident and they should speak out. So as part of the alpha of getting the good stuff from diverse directors, providing an environment where they feel confident to speak out. And then the third and final thought is the alpha that a diverse director or diverse directors can provide, their resourcefulness in overcoming all of the above disadvantages. The fact that you have to be motivated and disciplined, otherwise you wouldn't have made it to where you are now. There is a great philosopher, and I can't remember his name, but he said, there is always a better way. You have to find it. And that is, of course, the way that many diverse directors live, because if they couldn't find a better way, they wouldn't be here. And I simply close by giving the last word to Bruce Lee, who died at the age of 33, and I watched a documentary on him on Friday night. But he said, I wanted to break into the US film industry at a time when Chinese actors had no place and no voice. And he said that the only way that he could do that was to be like water. He said water is the softest substance, but it carved the Grand Canyon. So maybe the alpha that you get from diverse directors is that they have to learn to be like water. And many companies, in learning to be agile and nimble, could learn a lot from being like water. So we open it to the panel. Respond to that, Karen Rangi.
Let's go. Kia ora ana tātou katoa and malo nei happy tokelau language week to everybody. May, I want to pick up on your very first question that you asked, and that is it that diverse directors need to be retuned. So it's a really great theme for my 3 quick points that I want to start off with today, because that's something I absolutely disagree with. I don't think diverse directors need retuning. They need to be more instrumental in the composition of what gets played by the board. And so I love this. I am the chair of the Arts Council of New Zealand, so I'm taking a whole orchestral view on this, because I do think that really great boards are like really great orchestras. And I want to concentrate then on the conductor of the orchestra, in this case the chair. So number one, I think that in order to unlock the real gold, and I'm not sure about the term alpha, but the real gold that comes from diverse directors starts with the chair themselves having to understand, first of all understand, and then be able to value each kind of alpha offering that each director has to bring to the board. So that means chairs really putting time and effort into identifying, understanding and unpacking the unique strategic contribution that each director has to make, each diverse director. And I say strategic contribution because I think that strategy and purpose should be the anchor by which everybody gets connected to the board. So number one, the conductor's got to understand every single first violin, second violin, third bass player that they've got sitting in front of them. Number two, I think the chair has to make the space for more opportunities for directors to learn from each other. And by that I mean actually creating an environment where you're making it really clear that each person has a diverse contribution to make, but also spaces where they can display that, demonstrate that, again, in relation to what's important for the organisation. And my point number three, and any great conductor knows how to do this, is being able to equalise all the directors' offerings. So not putting them into nice little niches that you just bring out this one when you need to have a certain conversation. I think the chair is the one who should be regularly reinforcing that each director's contribution has equivalent value in that whole collective bid to get success. So that doesn't mean that orchestras should play nice, pretty pieces all the time. Some of the best pieces of music have got great discordant notes, right? But it does mean the chair's got to look at their own sort of choice in music and their own preferences, and actually probably they're the ones that need to do the retuning in terms of what's going to be the best combination of views at the table for this particular board. Those are my thoughts.
Kia ora. Rob, you can react to me, you can react to Karen, but you need to turn your mic on.
Yeah, I'm good now. Thank you, Karen. I agree with what Karen was saying. So just to maybe take that a little bit further, will not come from the stage we're at now. The stage we're at now is opening up governing bodies to diverse membership. That's a really important stage, and I'll come back to that. But the real benefit to our society from recognising from diversity will come when we change what it is we're doing and the way we structure our organisations and what the objectives of our organisations are. I think that is what Māori are finding, that the aim has to be to change the direction and change the vessel, not just change some of the crew. So I put that out there in front of us. That doesn't mean our current work is unimportant. It means it's vital, but it is a stage, not an end point. So to me, that's critical for us to understand. Diversity of intention, diversity of purpose, diversity of vessel is really the aim that will change our society. And so let's keep that popular now to say North Star. I think that's let's keep that as our North Star. Coming back to Karen's point, I do think it's absolutely right that we have to focus not on what we have to do to make diverse directors fit in. Fitting in is not the point. Being like the existing people is very much not the point. We might as well leave the existing people there as train people to be more like the old directors. We have to get the old directors to move or move out. And there's no way around that. I know people hate that being said about gender equity or about diversity, that you're trying to push old white men out. Well, the answer is the numbers tell you that, yes, you are having to do that because there isn't space around the board table for a dominant group to stay there forever. Some do have to move on and move out if they can't change. So we've got to be direct and we've got to be clear about that. It's a simple arithmetical outcome of the objective that we have. No point in mucking around about it. And a lot of pressure does go on chairs. And I just want to share something with you about that, which is that I've been passionate about wanting to make boards more diverse and even to change a lot of the objective of boards. But I find it hard to work with diverse directors. That should not be a surprise. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means it's a good thing. But it is hard coming from the cultural position that I do and the economic background that I do to adjust to the presence of someone who is disruptive. You want them there to be disruptive. That's the whole point of it. But it's still hard to deal with. And I was involved in an exercise a few months ago that really brought this home to me. And it was unrelated in a sense, but it was to do with a bullying charge in one of my organisations. And I was trying to resolve it, and we eventually got a resolution, not an entirely satisfactory one for anyone, but we got a resolution. But afterwards, one of the people involved on the other side to me said, "Rob, I'm pleased we got an outcome. You understood what we were saying. You were sympathetic to what we were saying, but you were not empathetic." And I went away and thought about that, and it was absolutely right. It's very hard to cross-culturally establish empathy with the way someone very different to you is thinking. And it's a really big challenge for chairs to get themselves onto a wavelength which is empathetic with another culture. So you need to do it. You won't do it by accident. You won't do it by being what you think is nice. You won't even necessarily do it by what you think is being helpful. What I'm learning is that you're going to have to change a lot of your own practices and ways of thinking as a chair to enable diverse directors to function effectively. The challenge is bigger than the most sympathetic or understanding Pākehā chair thinks it is. So that's my challenge to other chairs from my background, is don't underestimate this. It's harder because it's not only going to change the way this person is, the new diverse director, it's going to change the way the other directors are around the table. It's going to change the way you are. And with a bit of luck, it'll start the change in what your business is actually doing. My comments.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. Lynn.
Unmute myself. Kia ora, everyone. Good questions. I'll just answer your questions, May, because I like answering questions. Why is it harder for diverse directors because of different background? Yeah, it is because of the different background. And do they need mentoring? I think yes, but they also need role model, visible role models that actually can show there is a way and it can be done. So that's my short, simple answer to the first question. Is it harder for diverse director to, harder to get alpha out from, I don't like the word alpha. And is it harder to get alpha out from diverse director? I think that is yes. And I want to touch on something Rob just talked on later on. And you raised the issue about stereotype threats. I think that in a mature board context, that's really not a threat. So I think to start for a diverse director to get on board, it is hard. But once you're there, it's not so hard. And I quite like, May, your comment about being like water, because I personally is a bit like water. I adapt to my board because I want to be part of the board, and I don't necessarily want to kind of like be like them, but I want to fit in because ultimately it's a collective decision that we have to do. So in a way, the first 3 months is I will try to suss out what my board members are like and what they don't like, what push the button and what they hate the most, and then try to work around it and try to get the best positive outcome I can get. I agree with Karen though, the chair plays a really important role in this, but also the board culture, the board as a collective. The chair can do whatever you like and try to put people on board and make sure that it works and try different techniques. But if your other board members are not on board with it and they're not on the same song sheet, is a really difficult task. And coming back to Rob's comment about it's harder to work with diverse director, I disagree with that. I think it's hard to work with disruptive directors, no matter what they are, whether they are from diverse background or they are, they could be male, white, old, and they are difficult to work with because they refuse to listen and they're disruptive. They think that their way of thinking is the only way to go. And I have board members when I was a chair in a very diverse group, coming from commercial people, this I'm referring to Foundation North, where the board members are not actually appointed by the board themselves, as they were sort of parachute into the board. So you come up with all sort of background and you kind of have to sort it out. And as a chair of that one, where you have professional people, community groups, different interests, different background, different perspective, it is very hard. And you will have disruptive directors. That's not helpful. Because I don't think diversity means disruptive. Diversity for me means you bring your different background, your different perspective, your different ideas. And the most important thing is to be able to bring those ideas across and convince your board members that your ideas and your perspective has a validity. And then that depends on the other board members and the chair to accept that, to make it a safe place for you to express it, to make it that your contribution is acknowledged. May not be accepted all the time, and that's the way it goes. Not every opinion gets accepted, but you have the chance to speak up. You have the chance to say, hey, I don't think this is right. How about doing it this way? What do you think about this? And the other board members don't put you down for saying that, or don't just everyone. That's the worst thing, is everyone go really silent and no one say anything, and you thought, shit, sorry, and you thought, okay, maybe no one heard what I've said, or I should say it again because my English is not very good, or some sort of acknowledgement to say, hey, Lynn, that's a wild idea. It's funny that you're thinking it that way, but that's okay. We will put it in a mixing in a pot, and everyone can sort of give their thoughts on what they think about your idea. So the idea is that your idea get acknowledged, that's been put forward. Whether it get this accepted at the end is a collective decision, whether it's got merit or not. And the board's chair and other board members' conduct is so important in ensuring that happens. That's my 2 cents worth.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Kenny.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you for the previous speakers. I want to honor those leaders who walked this path before me. So I heard about May's 3 questions and also previous speakers' comments. So I just want to share my own experience in this regard. So in traditional boardroom settings, diverse directors are not native English speakers, as May said earlier on. So we often find that we feel marginalized, lost, and pressured to disregard our culture. So in my own experience, I want to offer 3 thoughts. So the first one is know our self-worth and be visible. So having born into a very traditional Chinese family with the only girl in 3 generations, I grew up with boys, younger boys, teenage boys, and older boys. So I need to find my own voice and be visible. The place I often do this is at the dinner table. It's where we had many discussions, arguments, opinions of certain things and what mattered. To me, that was my training ground to enter the boardroom. Knowing what I care, what I value, and make plenty of mistakes and learn from them, that means I am a better person each day. So knowing our self-worth and be visible is my first message. The second message is that I want to be my own CEO. This is my brand. This is how I want my customers to connect to me. I'm my own career, I take control, and I'm on the driver's seat. Therefore, what I said and how I said it becomes important at the board table. It requires me to prepare, to study, to think carefully, and to understand each other's perspective. So when I speak at the board table, I own my own decisions and take full responsibility. To me, this is sometimes a very lonely space. So be prepared to agree and prepared to disagree. Exercise own judgment and do my homework. The last message is be comfortable of being uncomfortable. Our own judgment, our decisions are based on where we came from, our own culture, our own background, our own upbringing, our own language, and our own values. So to me, So being challenged by others of my own decisions or something that I do not agree with, be comfortable, be authentic, actively listening to others' perspective, knowing what they care, and knowing that something they also have to offer to me that ignites creativity. The quality of the decision at the end of the day is hugely improved. So remember, if one of the top diverse directors rises, we all rise together. That, to me, shift the board's center of gravity. So thank you.
Kia ora, kia ora. David.
Kia ora, everyone. Thanks, May. I can agree with a lot of the statements already made. Just in the framing of your question, May, you've presented it as the onus being on the diverse director, and I would turn that around. I see the onus is actually on the organisation. The diversity is about performance. It's not about projection. So often where you get problems with diversity is when an organisation is trying to project to a certain market or a segment rather than actually really taking on board the value that diversity brings. So for me, an organisation that's performing by necessity has to be diverse, because the foundations of its strategy and decision making are optimized through a broad set of ideas. So I think that's the first thing, is to recognize that the onus is on an organization and the responsibility is about organizational performance, and it's a driver of performance. So in that sense, a diverse director is at an advantage rather than a disadvantage in my mind. But then if you accept that diversity is about performance, then there's some underlying values that flow through that. And so the chairing of the meeting, as Karen and Rob both talked about, becomes critical, because you need the value of tolerance to be flowing through everything that's said. You need to accept that disagreement is not about challenge or about a conflict. Disagreement is a necessary precursor to the ideation optimization process. So this whole point around tolerance needs to be embedded in an organization. And then finally, when you have an organization that behaves like that, at its core is humility, is a recognition of the sovereignty of individuals and the value that each individual brings, and the importance of that value to drive through the organization to deliver these optimal outcomes. So when I think of that, ego is the enemy of diversity, and perhaps the root issue here is not the ethnicity of the board makeup, but the value set of the board makeups today, which is making it more difficult for that diversity to be presented. And in that context, I would say that that actually you will measure the success of a diverse board by the performance of that organisation.
Excellent. So that's a good place to end, because of course alpha is wrongly stated, and when I was trying to look up alpha last night, which is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, all I could come up with was that it's at the highest reaches, it's the best. So Karen Rangi, can you elaborate on what gold we are looking for? What is the putia we are all having a discussion about today that you will get if you do the hard mahi? And I'm on to you next, Rob. And also you've suggested that we should have mutual mentoring. What's that about? Talk about those things for us.
Sure. So just in terms of the gold, and I think I've just put a little point in the chat about that line David just said, the sovereignty of individuals. That's the gold, right? The sovereignty that each individual has to bring to the board table. But of course, it's got to be strategically relevant. It's not just any kind of thing that you can bring to the board table. It's got to get right back to the purpose of the organisation. And there has to be more conversations about that at the board table, about the breadth and depth of input into that purpose in order to make the organisation perform really well. So I think that's really, really important. In terms of the mutual mentoring, again, I think it starts from the premise, because whenever I hear mentoring, I think about, and I know it depends on who's doing it, but quite often there's a thought that it's about, transferring skills and experiences to another person to make them better. And yet if we start from the premise that we've all got something to offer, then actually mutual mentoring is the way to go. And it's a way to equalise the different and diverse skills and experiences that we've all got to bring to each other. My last point on that is that I guess one of the frustrations I've heard from many people who are termed diverse directors is that, you get to a board and quite often you're called on to educate your fellow board members about the world that you bring before you can even be there at the table next to them having an equal conversation. Otherwise, they're completely contextless. And, and it's a bit frustrating because I think, I've done my work and my hard yards to get to the board table in order to be an operating director. I expect everybody else to as well. So I think it's a really good question for, and I agree again with what David said about diversity as an organisation's responsibility. What is it that you really need at the board table to be a really well-firing board? What do you need across all of your board members? And if you haven't got it, where are you getting it from? Because the answer can't always be, I'll get it from that diverse director sitting just across there because they've got it in spades.
Dora, thank you. So Rob, can I just ask you, what does diversity of vessel mean? And also, can you give us some experience in terms of the mechanisms that you use when you find it hard to work with disruptive or diverse directors? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, sure. Quickly on Alpha, I didn't do Greek at school, but I've spent quite a lot of time studying capitalism. And in capitalism, Alpha just means outperformance in terms of financial performance. So that's sort of what's familiar to me. Just to explain, and we've all approached this from different ways in what we've had to say, there is an argument, a very strong argument, that if you take the existing business organisation, I'm really interested in business, the other kinds of organisations are vitally important, but I don't have a lot of experience in them. In business, I don't think there's any question that by increasing the diversity on your board and in your management structures, you can improve the possibilities of gaining alpha in a diverse society. Why would you not have a diverse board and management team in a diverse society? I think it's inevitable. It's so simplistically obvious that it will help you to gain that alpha. So I think that's a kind of a really interesting thing. To me, it's not what I really care about. I can understand why people want to get onto boards and get into senior management positions, and I have plenty of support for that. Again, that's kind of interesting. It's important for those individuals, but it's not going to change society. It may gain alpha, it may gain a nice job for those people, which is fine, good, fair, all those things, but actually doesn't change society. I'm more interested in social change. So what I try and do in the businesses or other organisations I'm in is to promote change. Diversity is one way that is achieved. The key way it's achieved is not by moulding leadership from diverse backgrounds into the existing objectives of the business. It's changing the objectives of the business. And if you bring in people who are strong, who are intelligent, who are assertive from different backgrounds, you are more likely to get A, change, and B, change which fits the society within which you're working. So that's the point that I'm interested in. The rest of it's all true, it's all fair, but it's just not something I care about very much.
Yeah, well, Rob, I'm really interested in teasing that out further. I wonder if Kenny wants to comment on this. I've always thought that one of the things that you gain from being diverse or an outsider is that you learn to be unpopular, because you have to learn to back yourself, and sometimes backing yourself means that you're backing something that's unpopular. But as a result of...
Hey, mate, you think that you want to try being a trade union official who the Prime Minister's just labelled a communist, joining the board of the Bank of New Zealand.
Right.
I've seen the movie.
All right, very good. Well, we won't compete, but I was interested in what Kenny said. She said that you have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that as a diverse director, you don't have a choice. So you actually have more practice at being uncomfortable. And as a consequence of that, you therefore end up being courageous, actually. You end up having the resilience to actually make a point, even when no one wants to hear it, because actually it's for the good of the company and it's for the good of the economy and it's for the good of everybody. Otherwise, you just sit there and shut up. Kenny,
Thank you, May, and thank you,
that?
Rob. I think it's very important to recognize that. So to me, I take it as an opportunity to learn and also an advantage. So knowing that sometimes I'm not popular, sometimes things might not go my way. So is how do I put my thought across at the board table, knowing that someone might challenge me, knowing that someone might not agree with me. So that resiliency, that empathy, and also active listening becomes like everyday homework.
So can I just pick this up now with Lynn Lim? Lynn, you are a diverse chair. You've been a diverse director. We've heard Karen talk about being a diverse chair. I want you to reflect on the issues that arise for diverse chairs. Are there unique issues that arise for diverse chairs if you're sitting on a non-diverse board? And in terms of how you relate to other directors, but also how they relate to you?
I think the fact, well, it was very unusual to have a diverse chair. That's number one. I was always asked, how do you get there? Were you appointed? And when I say no, I was actually elected by the board members. The board members decided that, in fact, you know, I have the skills to offer. And to be a diverse chair is, for me, is quite different from being a diverse director, because as a chair, your role goes further than just being, you know, saying what you want as a diverse director, contributing, and can be as challenging as you like, because your role is quite different. But as a chair, you need your whole board to come to a collective decision. And when you have board members, they are diverse, and board members, they are very opinionated, you got to make sure that everyone got to have their say, and what they say is valued. They must not necessarily be accepted by other members, but they are heard and they've been considered, and everyone gave a fair chance to say something, to contribute, to make the organization better. What is it? So your question is, how does it? It's uncomfortable, because one thing I don't want to do is, like, because I am there as an Asian woman, as a lawyer, as a, you know, all these things, diversity tick box, but I don't want to be categorized as that. I want to be my own person. I have my own background. I have my own perspective. There are some things I do not agree with, but there's something, well, I can live with it. But the main thing is, I want to have the freedom to be able to speak, and I want my board members to have the freedom to be able to speak safely and be heard. And then we collectively decide what's the best outcome or the best way forward. And actually that includes working with management, because being a diverse chair and working with management are usually not that diverse. And that's difficult as well, because you then have this very diverse board chair, diverse board members with very old style management, and that will give rise to a lot of discussion, and that needs to be managed. It's not easy, but mainly I think respect and trust is very important to be a chair, because they need to they don't have to like you. They just need to know you can get a job done. I think as a chair, for me, I don't think my board members have to like me. It's not my job for them to like me, but I'm there to make sure we get decision done and robust discussion before the decision is made.
So Karen, can you come in on that? Because I was very interested by what Lynn said. She says, well, you know, and sometimes I don't altogether agree with it, but I can kind of live with it. I just was thinking about the cultural capability training that I always give people. And what we find is that people from diverse backgrounds, diverse directors, tend to have a lot more flex and a much smaller core of things that they won't change because they've had to learn to adapt, which was one of the themes that Kenny raised. Can you resonate with any of the issues that Lynn is raising?
Yeah, I've got a slightly different view to Lynn, and it's interesting thinking about the cultural capability because I think one of the things over my years of governance it's taught me is actually I can be a much better governor if I strengthen my core and I'm a bit more picky about where I flex. And while I totally understand what Lynn is saying, actually one of my missions as a governor here in New Zealand is I'd like to think that if I've done a really good job as a governor, that one of the things people will acknowledge and realise is that part of my good governance comes from the fact that I've brought something from my own culture. So I know at the moment people don't necessarily identify, they don't necessarily connect good governance and being a Cook Islander, but that's part of my mission. I come from a culture where we've been doing governance for thousands of years, and if we hadn't, we would have died out as a small community on small islands in the middle of the big huge ocean. And I say this as much to my own communities as I do to other people. We've got a whole lot to learn about governance practices from a whole lot of different places. Governance is not just a Western thing. And I think the more that we can have conversations about valuable governance practices that come from not just different ethnicities, but different situations, then I think the better and richer and stronger, New Zealand governance will be. And this again gets back to the fact that recognising diversity is right at the heart of that.
Yeah, thank you. So David, you're not off the hook because I'm coming to you. But can I just ask Rob one more question? Rob, you said something very profound, which I really understood. That sympathy and understanding is sometimes not enough. You also need empathy. So we've just been talking about cultural capability. I talk about the cultural capability training that we give, and I mean, do directors need more? Do chairs in particular need more training, development, and cultural capability? Is that what brings empathy? For me, empathy comes because I've lived it. So when I see somebody else going through it, I say, I recognize that. I've been through that. Is it different when you're not visually diverse as a director or a chair, and therefore it's harder to empathize?
Yeah, I think it is. It reminds me a bit of that old saying about salesmen. The key to being a good salesperson is sincerity. If you can fake that, you can fake anything. Faking empathy is quite hard. You either kind of have it from lived experience or you don't. And yes, it can be learned, I guess. I mean, I'm trying to learn it, but I pretty obvious that in a number of respects I struggle. I think the key to this, May, is that we undervalue lived experience in selecting what we call governors. I hate the term, but anyway, it's what we use. So to me, one of the things I would like to see us do is choosing leadership much more based on lived experience than we do on kind of narrowly channeled experience of a career that leads to the board table. It's a little bit like, to me, the way in management structures we devalue what we call absence from the workplace for women. What we call absence from the workplace is actually raising a family, usually, rather than just taking an extended holiday. And we don't value what has been learned by people who have taken time off to raise a family as being useful to management. Well, to me, that's wrong. I think we lose a lot by taking that view. So that's a great example to me of one we can all pretty easily relate to, where lived experience is very relevant to the kind of roles that you play at a board table. Most of the people here will know, and I'll end on this, most of the people here will know, although others may think that you spend a lot of time talking about finance at the board table, it often is a reasonably small part of what directors are having to think about and assess and judge. There's a whole range of other factors that are not simply numbers on a profit and loss or balance sheet, to use the old-fashioned terminology for those things. So yeah, to me, that's where we need to be turning. And I can tell you, as someone in their 70s from the background I'm from, it is really hard to make the right changes to your behaviour and your ways of listening and talking to fully function in a diverse board. And what does that tell you? Well, it doesn't just tell you that it's hard, it probably tells you that some people like me should move on and allow it to happen.
So let's just pick up on that, David Turner, because really what Rob is saying is that there are benefits, as Kenny was saying before. I see it as an advantage, not a disadvantage, because actually it's a shortcut. We don't need to train to get empathy to understand what it's like to be the underdog or be the outer. We've been there. That was our path. We didn't have a choice. And so it's a shortcut. But you were adamant with me. You said, I want to talk because the true value of diversity is about execution in the market. It's about customers and it's about staff. And the whole problem with diversity is we've completely misconceived what it's about. So talk to me about that.
Well, I do believe that diversity is about performance. So I think we agree on that. And the way that performance flows through an organisation is it enables us to better connect with either a customer or our team. So it's either capability or customer that drives the success of an organisation. And I don't understand how some old palangis in a boardroom would be best equipped to define what a strategy around customer and capability could be if they're not attached. And a great example of that in my community is Norski Scoot, where in 2005 you had a whole lot of retired executive paper manufacturers on their newly released iPads setting strategy for an organization without any understanding that within 15 years they would be obsolete. Maybe a technology specialist would have been good sort of addition to that boardroom in 2005 to help them steer and move. But so I think diversity is it's so fundamental to me in our organization. I find it unusual actually that an organization wouldn't be focused on getting greater levels of diversity, both in a governance and in a management sense. But the challenge with that is that when you transition, so you've got this diverse board, you've got this diverse set of management team, you still need to execute. So ideation is naturally broad, so diversity naturally stretches you, but you need your management team to be focused on delivery. So one of the challenges with greater levels of diversity is to know when you're flexing and when you're focused.
Thank you. Karen, you've just put up a great post which says that we need to change the metrics of how we measure a great Aotearoa New Zealand governor, to chair, director, to recognise a far more diverse range of interpersonal characteristics, as well as being really very important to govern well. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure thing. Just in a nutshell, it's really interesting the focus, and look, this is not at all devaluing technical expertise at the board table, but the traditional measures of what makes a really good board member has been really focused on those technical aspects and very little on the interpersonal. And at the end of the day, it's about the relationships. So it's really strange to me that on the one hand, it can be all about relationships, but you get measured based on something else. I just think there's a real opportunity here for the governance fraternity to be really honest about what makes a really great board member. And again, it gets back, and I'm really loving sort of, David's absolute direct connection between diversity and performance, because that's the reason for being, right? And if you want to perform really well, you start from there. You don't start from some sort of almost artificial set of, I'll have one lawyer, one accountant, one IT tech, a couple of Māoris and a Pacific person, and if you're really lucky, an Asian person, and that will be the ideal board. You start from what performance you really, really want to see.
Rob, can I just ask you, is there one thing that you've learnt today from this discussion that you hadn't thought about before? Lynn, I'm coming to you next.
No, there's not one. There's several. It's the the diversity. So one thing is the diversity of reasons for wanting diversity needs thinking about, I think. The second thing is how do I express this? The ability of, and I think again in terms of businesses primarily, the ability of businesses to match performance across a wide range of objectives. Because I think we've all used the term performance and used it in different ways as each of us has talked, from financial to social to even kind of cultural performance. So I think without being articulate about it, that's another thing that I need to reflect on quite a bit, May. So, I came into the discussion with some quite clear views about what I thought that they've been well challenged, and I need to go away and think about them. Unfortunately, I do have to cut off, as you know, but that's because I'm going to an unconscious bias training session at Sky City for our board, and having advocated for it, it doesn't feel very good if I don't go. So if I leave abruptly, soon, that's why.
We understand that you're not unconsciously telling us something. Thank you so much for your contribution, Rob, as always. Lynn, talk to me about something that you've learned or thought today that you hadn't learned or thought before.
Well, I like Rob's statement on that, there is diversity, thoughts on diversity, because we are all the converted here. We're here because we believe in diversity. But for me, is the boards out there that's not diverse. How do we get there, and how do we make sure more of us are there? And that is maybe touch on the social change aspect that we're talking that Rob raised. Maybe that's how we do it. Maybe some of us will do it by putting our head up the parapet. And I remember May, you tell me before that I should put my head more above the parapet. I hate doing that because I don't like being shot at. But the thing is, diversity for me is not about having different people. It is about skill set, but it's not to have groupthink, not to have people who think the same, who play in the same golf clubs, who has the same, social upbringing. Diversity is different. You have someone in there that think quite differently from you, and it's a challenge. And what Rob has identified is actually what commercial board struggle with. And in commercial board, when they know each other, they play golf together, they have the same background, is really, really hard being different. And for us who wants to get there, we represent the change. And I think we should try harder using whichever way. Karen's way of saying that, yes, we need to put our stamp in there. My way will be like, let's just flow with water, get there first and make your change. My thought is always get there on the board table, then put your stamp on it. Once you have the respect of your board members, they know that you know what you're talking about. It's like Kenny, very firm about your view, what you stand for, make a change then. And then bring other people along with you.
Excellent, thank you. So the next session we're going to have is about how do you know if a chair or a director is a diverse thinker. And so I was just thinking about that what Karen said and what everyone said, what Rob said about alpha and the problems with that. Actually, maybe I was thinking more about a unicorn, because I think that one of the marks of being a truly diverse thinker is that you come up with ideas that nobody else has ever come up with. So I'm just now going to hand over, because we've only got 5 minutes left, and Jeff McDowell and Howard Ross, I promise you some time so that you could bring the session to a close. It's been interesting, really interesting, and we've captured the ideas. They're all going to go on the Superdiversity Institute website, and we're going to start the learning. So can I just thank the panel and Howard and Jeff?
Thanks. Thank you, May. Thank you everyone for sharing today. And I think it takes a lot of huge leap of faith for people sometimes to be as vulnerable as what they are and sharing their experiences and what they've dealt with in their career. We've sort of seen over 25 years in the recruitment industry, some really, we look at the stereotypes that existed back in 1995 and what they're like today. We have come a long way as a society, but we've still got a much bigger journey to go on as well. One thing I think we are as New Zealanders is that we're really understanding. So if we take that time to really understand people's core, who they are, where they come from, and what they actually stand for, then that's actually really such an important first step when you're kind of going on this journey. And I think as chairs, it's so important to take that time out to really understand people, because if you understand where people actually do come from and who they actually are, that's just the first step, I think, around towards diversity. As part of the journey with you, May, and your team, and what we've sort of seen in recent years is that I think there's a perception actually out there is that when you look at people that come from diverse backgrounds, maybe they don't actually have the skills and knowledge and experience. But one thing that we actually find, there's just a wealth of experience and talent that sits out there at the moment. They just haven't been given the opportunity to sort of unleash themselves on boards. So, and I really liked your phrase, Rob, around sort of lived experience, because you do talk about skills and knowledge, but it is about that lived experience and what people actually have gone through and what they can bring to the table as well. So I think as a collective group, understanding each other and understanding each other's perspectives is number one. But May, thank you for the opportunity. You're really open to continue to learn and be part of the Superdiversity Institute. So greatly thank you for your time.
Well, I've really enjoyed training you and your staff on cultural capability, and it's been really exciting to take you on a CQ tick journey. So we look forward to that happening soon. But I think it's one of the key things that came out of today is that cultural capability in a director and in director search turns out to be pretty important. So it's great that you and Jeff are doing this journey. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to finish 1 minute early. And remember, the next Zoom series seminar is going to be on how do you know if a director or a chair is a diverse thinker. We throw this word around, we throw this phrase around, oh yes, but that person's a diverse thinker. Well, what is a diverse thinker? What are the characteristics? What are the factors? If you are interested, then come and join us. And thanks to Frank and the Knowledge Hunters for the Zoom series. Kia ora koutou. Hei kona.
Thank you.